The Biden administration in the US has decided to turn its attention to the fentanyl trafficking threat and has announced a series of indictments and sanctions against Chinese companies and executives blamed for importing the chemicals used to make the deadly drug. The charges against 8 Chinese companies include advertising, manufacturing and distributing precursor chemicals for synthetic opioids like fentanyl. This has been described as the latest effort in America's fight against the deadliest overdose crisis in the country's history. The move comes one day before senior administration officials are set to visit Mexico, whose cartels are part of the global trafficking network, for meetings expected to involve discussions on the drug threat. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland said, and I quote, "We know that this network includes the cartel's leaders, their drug traffickers, their money launderers, clandestine lab operators, security forces, weapon suppliers and their chemical suppliers. And we know that this global fentanyl supply chain, which ends with the deaths of Americans, often starts with chemical companies in China." Besides charging 8 companies, the Justice Department has also indicted 12 executives for their alleged roles in drug trafficking. In coordinated action, the Treasury Department announced sanctions against 28 people and companies, mostly in China but also in Canada, that will cut them off from the US financial system and prohibit anyone in the United States from doing business with them. None of those charged have been arrested, but Garland said prosecutors intend to bring every one of these defendants to justice. Deputy Treasury Secretary Wally Adeyemo said it's the latest step in the rapid scaling up of our work targeting the financial flows that power the global illicit drug trade. He said the Treasury is also seeking out the friends, families and affiliates of the people who benefit from drug sales. He said, if you benefit from the proceeds of this illicit activity, we are going to come after your assets. Mexico and China are the primary sources for fentanyl and fentanyl-related substances that are trafficked directly into the United States, according to the Drug Enforcement Administration, which is tasked with combating illicit drug trafficking in the US. Nearly all the precursor chemicals that are needed to make fentanyl come from China. And the companies that make the precursors routinely use fake return addresses and mislabel the products in order to avoid being caught by law enforcement. Republicans for long now have complained that the administration is simply not doing enough to stop fentanyl, and the issue is likely to in fact figure prominently in next year's presidential campaign. In February 2021, Republican state attorneys general wrote a letter to President Biden and Secretary of State Antony Blinken calling on them to designate Mexican drug cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. Last year, a group of Republican attorneys general asked the president to declare fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction. Fentanyl, a powerful opioid, is the deadliest drug in American history. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention states that drug overdose deaths have increased more than 7-fold in the US from 2015 to 2021. More than 100,000 deaths a year have been linked to drug overdoses in the US since 2020, and about 2/3 of those are related to fentanyl. The death toll is more than 10 times the number of drug deaths that were reported in the US back in 1988 at the height of the crack epidemic. The US has taken a slew of actions to stem the tide of fentanyl coming into the country. The Biden administration has imposed over 200 sanctions related to the illegal drug trade, but it continues to pose a major challenge to the US today.
Today, Treasury is imposing major new sanctions against 28 individuals and entities involved in the illicit drug trade. Effectively, immediately, these individuals and entities located in the People's Republic of China and in Canada are cut off from using the U.S. financial system, and all U.S. persons are barred from transacting with them.
And we know that this global fentanyl supply chain, which ends with the deaths of Americans, often starts with chemical companies in China. Fentanyl is the deadliest drug threat the United States has ever faced. It is nearly 50 times more potent than heroin and is a nearly invisible poison.